Welcome, it's time for another tour of some lore. Today's tour will be on the first rebellion in the Hunger Games universe, so let go and may the odds be in your favor. The Dark Days, a brutal 3-year civil war fought between the capital and the districts. Beginning of the conflict and the reasons for the conflict, the collapse of civilization. Sometime in the future, the world was devastated by a series of natural and ecological disasters, including droughts, storms, and rising sea levels. As the Earth's resources dwindled, nations began to invade one another in a desperate bid for survival. This conflict escalated into nuclear war, which caused civilization to collapse entirely. The combination of warfare and famine resulted in the deaths of billions of people, forcing the remaining survivors to band together in smaller groups. Panem emerged from the ruins of North America, encompassing the territories formerly known as the United States, Canada, and Mexico. The geography of the continent was drastically altered by the environmental collapse. It is believed that rising sea levels swallowed approximately 500 miles of coastline, submerging major cities and power centers. Consequently, the seat of power shifted inland to the Rocky Mountains, where the capital was established. To manage critical resources, such as coal, grain, and textiles, during these crises, the government may have enacted emergency powers, stripping citizens of their freedoms to ensure the population was fed and heated. First Rebellion, the Dark Days. When it started, the First Rebellion began approximately 77 years before the events of the Hunger Games trilogy. In the Panem timeline, this is designated as 3 BTT, 3 years before the Treaty of Treason. The conflict lasted for 3 years, concluding with the capital's victory and the signing of the Treaty of Treason in 0 ATT. The war was a civil insurrection, driven by the inequality between the capital and the districts. Key causes included resource exploitation and poverty. Panem was structured as a totalitarian dictatorship where each district had a designated industry, e.g. coal, grain, textiles. While the districts provided these resources to the capital, the citizens within the districts rarely got to use them and lived in varying levels of poverty. Totalitarian control. The capital's fascist governance and absolute control over the populace caused significant unrest, eventually boiling over into revolution. District 13's instigation. The consensus within Panem history is that District 13 was the primary force behind the rebellion. As the center of military manufacturing and nuclear development, District 13 instigated the conflict by disseminating arms and communications to rebels in the other districts. It is theorized that District 13 initiated the war because their control of nuclear weapons provided them with the leverage of mutually assured destruction, MAD, leading them to believe they could challenge the capital's might. The rebel invasion of the Rocky Mountains failed catastrophically, primarily because the difficult terrain left the rebel forces exposed to the capital's superior air power, tactical disadvantage, and air superiority. While the rebels had successfully besieged the capital for 2 years, cutting off supplies and causing mass starvation, they eventually attempted to break the stalemate by scaling the Rocky Mountains to invade the city directly. This proved to be a fatal error for several reasons. Exposure. The steep, open terrain of the mountains left the rebel soldiers completely exposed with no cover. Air raids. The capital, possessing a superior air force, utilized hovercraft and bombers to conduct massive air raids on the climbers. The capital forces also utilized higher vantage points within the mountains to attack the rebels from above. Fortifications. The rebels were ultimately unable to breach the capital's city fortifications, causing the plan to backfire significantly. Strategic blunder and disorganization. The invasion is described in historical analyses as a massive strategic mistake. Breaking ranks. Some accounts suggest the invasion was disorganized, with districts breaking ranks or pulling a Hannibal, attempting a difficult mountain crossing, against the tactical advice of District 13, which preferred to maintain the siege. Potential sabotage. There are theories that capital spies may have infiltrated the rebel leadership and suggested this disastrous invasion plan to lure the rebels into a trap, though this remains a point of speculation. The consequence: District 13's withdrawal. The catastrophic loss of troops and equipment during this failed invasion turned the tide of the war back in the capital's favor. Realizing that a conventional military victory was no longer possible after this defeat, District 13 negotiated a secret ceasefire with the capital, withdrawing their nuclear threat and abandoning the remaining districts to defeat. Outbreak and capital countermeasures, circa 3 BTT. The rebellion was sparked by the districts rising up against the capital's totalitarian rule. The consensus among historians in Panem is that District 13 instigated the conflict. As the center of military manufacturing and nuclear development, District 13 armed the rebel coalition and provided communication networks. To combat the insurrection, the capital utilized advanced biological warfare. Mutations. The capital deployed genetically modified animals, such as trackerjackers, placed like landmines, and jabberjays, birds used to spy on rebels by recording and repeating human speech. Air raids. The capital conducted air raids against the districts, while rebels launched counter-raids on the capital, often immobilizing the city and forcing citizens into bomb shelters. 2. The Siege of the Capital, circa 2 BTT. For roughly 2 years, the rebels successfully besieged the capital, cutting off its supply lines from the districts. This period marked the capital's most desperate hour. Mass famine. With no resources coming in, the capital's food supply ran out. The situation became so dire that citizens were forced to trade furniture for rations, and in extreme cases, resorted to cannibalism to survive. Snow family losses. During this period, the Snow family lost significant status and wealth. General Crassus Snow, Coriolanus Snow's father, was assassinated by a rebel sniper, and his mother died during childbirth because air raids prevented her from accessing medical care. 3. The failed invasion of the Rockies, the turning point. Hoping to break the stalemate and end the war, the rebel forces attempted a massive ground invasion of the capital by scaling the Rocky Mountains. This is widely regarded as a catastrophic strategic error. The difficult, open terrain left the rebel army exposed to the capital's superior air force. Capital hovercraft and bombers devastated the rebel ranks from higher vantage points. The massive loss of troops and equipment during this failed offensive turned the tide of the war back in favor of the capital. 4. The secret ceasefire and betrayal, circa 0 BTT. Realizing victory was no longer attainable after the failed invasion, District 13 made a move to ensure its own survival at the expense of the other districts. Nuclear standoff. District 13 aimed its nuclear arsenal at the capital, threatening mutually assured destruction. MAD. The deal. A secret truce was negotiated. The capital agreed to leave District 13 alone if they withdrew from the war. To cover this up, the capital bombed the surface of District 13 to fake its destruction, using the ruins as propaganda to terrorize the remaining districts. The withdrawal District 13's population moved into underground bunkers, effectively abandoning the other 12 districts to the capital's wrath. 5. The Treaty of Treason and Aftermath, 0-1 ATT. Without the military support and nuclear leverage of District 13, the remaining rebellion collapsed, and the districts were brought back under totalitarian control. The Treaty of Treason. In the immediate aftermath, 0 ATT, the capital drafted this treaty to punish the districts for their defiance. Institution of the Hunger Games. As a permanent reminder of the rebellion's failure, the treaty established the Hunger Games, requiring the annual sacrifice of children from each of the 12 remaining districts. The first games were held the following year. 1 ATT. Based on the provided sources, there are no exact official statistics listing the total military or civilian death toll for the first rebellion, the Dark Days. However, the sources provide specific details regarding the scale of loss during key events of Panem's history. The first rebellion, the Dark Days. Rebel forces. The rebels suffered heavy casualties during their failed invasion of the Rocky Mountains. The difficult terrain and their exposure to capital air power resulted in a catastrophic loss of troops that ultimately cost them the war. Capital civilians. While a specific number is not documented, the capital population suffered mass famine during the 2-year rebel siege. The conditions were severe enough that many citizens died of starvation or resorted to cannibalism to survive. District 13. The capital bombed the surface of District 13 heavily, but the death toll is unknown because the population had already moved into underground bunkers. The war was terrible for both sides and did nothing to change the way each side saw and felt about one another, and only served to inflame hate and malice. Each of them felt and lead to the Second Rebellion so many years later. Thanks for being here. Hope you'll be back soon.